It's felt like an extremely full few months here at Edible Acres at our little half-acre site. We've been shipping since mid-March, and now it's early May. We're finally starting to be able to put some real focus into our home garden, get some nursery beds up and running, deal with the root cellar and all of the bounty and burden of that space, all the amazingness of that. And I thought I'd pause this evening after another long full day and share some notes and kind of just do a longer form meander through the garden and what we're up to. So if that sounds compelling, stick around. It is hard to know where to begin in a wander in this landscape. There's so many new aspects and old aspects, but overall, I'm beginning kind of at the start of the garden. I think I've got a video from way back when, 0.1 acre and huge production or something like that, maybe from 2016 or 2017. I'm going to link to that here so you can kind of see where this garden was a few years ago. For those of you that are new to this channel, Sasha and I started this backspace here in the spring of 2013. So we're coming into the 9th year of this garden, and it does a lot of wonderful production for us. Maybe I'll zoom in on some of these beds and look at some plants. This area just to the north of the garden is what we've been focusing a bit more on. For folks that watch a lot, you can see it's a fair bit more detailed and refined at this moment. Still pretty feral in some areas. We kind of like having these corridors of a looser, more feral vibe, and then some areas that are really focused on production. We've committed to loose hay as our walkway for this season. Each year we try to find a different material to work with, sometimes sawdust. The hay we've gone with because we had access to a couple of round bales of silage hay, and we had a work party of folks that were willing to help. And it makes for a really simple, straightforward way. When people come, we can say, if you see hay, feel free to walk on hay, and if it isn't hay, it's a garden. Anyway, I digress. Let's look at this bed. This is about a 4.5, almost 5 foot wide bed. And I know I've alluded to this concept before, but we're diving into it a lot more thoroughly this year. The concept of integrating perennial plant nursery work and or perennial systems in the center third of a garden bed, and then holding the space for annual production on either edge. And there's a real key reason why we're leaning into that more and more. Part of it is about access and flow, basically partitioning a given garden bed into multiple zones of use. So for example, some of the characters in here in the center, these are all baby Brianna apricot seedlings. We had really great success with how the seeds overwintered. So we've been transplanting out a few thousand of them. There's hardwood cuttings that were on bottom heat of cultivar autumn olive, of goji berry, more Brianna apricot, and then it transitions into a sea of carmine gumi seedlings. We had a friend who had a huge flush of carmine gumi seedlings pop up this spring underneath the pawpaw tree, and we purchased those to step them up, and so we've got hundreds and hundreds of those. This space in the middle will be growing for the season. They'll be dug up in the fall. We don't need to necessarily access that every single day. And so what's nice about this, they can be in the middle, and then this edge can be transitioned into lettuce and kale and broccoli and cilantro and parsley. In other words, crops we want to access quite a bit, and it puts all those crops at very, very easy, very, very comfortable distance. But when we go to water those, we're also easily able to water the nursery crops. So it integrates rather than segregates these two different key aspects to our gardening, which is the nursery work for our income and to keep expanding these plantings, and then also our more immediate food needs right here and now. If we look through that lens in the garden, we see that pattern playing out more and more. Here's a bed that by all accounts is a bit too wide. It's a very girthy bed in this area, and it kind of tapers over there. Clearly we are not stuck on formal layout and exact measurements, but what you have here, it's even a micro partition of zones of use. We've got Nanking cherry through the center. These are male sea berry cuttings that are rooting, and then gumis down there, so nursery again in the middle, and then annuals, but less frequently harvested. So these are non-heading broccoli. We'll pluck leaves periodically to cook with those, and then cilantro on the edge, which is something we might trim more frequently. So the most accessed right on the edge, moderately accessed along with chard in the moving towards the interior, and then nursery work, then more lettuces and chard, and some different varietals of kale, all getting along really beautifully in this garden space. We noticed that robins, as every year, have taken huge interest. They watch us from the fence line. I think they generally sit right along the fence and watch us work. And as soon as we walk away, they come in to collect worms, which can be pretty devastating for a new seedling. So in this case, where we've got these gummies, very, very high value nursery stock, we simply took some miscanthus stalks that we had to cut down anyway from the front and stuck a bunch of them in there, and it makes basically an inhospitable space for robins for now, and then once they're established enough, we can simply pull them and lay them down as a mulch in between. So it's a way to encourage them not to enter spaces that are fragile and high value, and do so in a way that's completely biodegradable. You can see more miscanthus basically around all of the gummy blocks that we've planted. And this is the harvest of the stalks from our privacy wall by the road. This is about a third of that. Needs to be cut anyway. So my gosh, it's just so many layers of yield in these systems. The pruning and the harvesting that you need to do anyway with some of these characters translates into protection, gentle protection from birds and rabbits. We could put them much, much closer to keep rabbits out if that's what we needed to do. So it's kind of neat to cycle through quote unquote waste aspects of the system and have these beautiful, simple solutions right at the time of year where we need to do it anyway. There's so much going on in this garden. We're starting to really fall in love with this space again. I think once we've renovated the walkways, so it's very clear how to flow and move through the space, and then reclaim some of the beds from a truly feral wildness and get them productive, but then juxtapose that with beds that are adjacent where, for example, there's curly dock and dead nettle and chickweed all through here. Extremely wild, extremely medicinal, exquisite food. We're going to do a video soon where Sasha shows she's been cooking greens along with the eggs that have yellow dock and bloody dock and nettles and garlic mustard and garlic greens and comfrey. Like all these plants that just do so well in here. It's amazing and wonderful to have them hold space. And then as the chickweed starts to senesce and the yellow dock starts to get a little bit bitter, we can cut them down, send it to the chickens, and transplant in or plant in some zucchini, maybe put in okra, do some sort of taller summer crop that can be competitive with them. But for now, invite these wild friends to kick it and hang out and provide these beautiful yields. I mean, how incredible is that? As the honeybees and the mason bees and the bumblebees come through to pollinate the honeyberries, they can land on the purple dead nettle. We could work with these for medicine, or we could just enjoy their beauty. And then as needed, we can dig them up, send them to the chickens, and plant some other things if we needed to. We just set up a really simple stock tank. This was what used to be our biochar making hot tub. It's just the perfect size, 2 foot by 6 foot by 2 foot or 3 foot tall for 2 people to sit in there. But in the summer, it is a beautiful tank to water from. So we've got our bilge pump in the pond over there and the solar panel, which normally services that high tunnel, but once in a while we can refill this, and of course right next to a huge pile of nettles. So gotta be careful when you come into water, but having these big tanks that are poised throughout the garden, having a really big one right here center of the garden at a high point is going to make it much, much easier to keep up with watering. We don't have sprinklers, we don't have drip tape, we walk the water around. We're very happy to do it, but it's nice to make some improvements. And we've got the seaberry there to the south and west to provide shade from the late day heat. We'll make a cover for this soon. I want to make some little floating bits so that bees can land in there and safely drink water, and if birds fall in they can get out, but probably for the most part cover it so that it stays cool. Some of the more maturing aspects, it's nice to see the edges of this space starting to really come into their own. We've got these blocks of willows. For those of you that ordered from us this spring, hopefully your willows are starting to root and bud. You can see where we took some pretty hard cuts on a few of the basket making varieties. We actually didn't sell enough willow cuttings in order to do the pruning I would like to have done. My intent was to cut this whole block flush to ground, but there were not, the desire for those cuttings wasn't there. And then it also presented as this really beautiful flow of nectar with all the catkins, so we just left them. So we'll cut them maybe in the fall. The understory here of honeyberry, this is a block of pure Japanese genetics. They're Yesberry Solo and Yesberry Maxi along with Kiko. Incredibly productive, really, really huge, delicious fruits. We're working hard to figure out how to propagate them more readily. So for example, this Kiko has been stool layered immensely. Probably in the fall we'll be able to take some more divisions. If you're a local person and you're interested, we have potted up some of the Japanese as well as the Russian honeyberries. We'll do a video once the harvest comes in, but it feels like this year they're lining up to be quite productive. Every one of those little beautiful flowers would hopefully be a fruit. Fingers crossed, sea berries have done good pollination. This is our 2 males. We're still trying to work hard to figure out how to propagate them readily, but they had a good dose of pollen, and all the females nearby seem to be receptive and have their timing right, so soon enough we'll start checking for tiny fruits forming in there. I'm just hoping beyond hope that we get a huge crop of sea berry, maybe enough that we can actually harvest with friends and share with community. In our neighbor's spot, we'll do a more thorough update soon, but we've been planting the swales to the south and upslope of the pond with more and more cultivar sea berry. We're going to fill this landscape to the brim with them as much as is possible. They love the full sun of our neighbor's site. They love the really dense clay, the weird wetness. They don't care if deer and rabbits and voles are around. They are quickly becoming a keystone element in our future designs for resilience and medicine and food. And my gosh, they're beautiful. There's nice radiant female and tall male there in the background, stately gentlemen casting pollen on all the ladies nearby. Magical fruit, to be sure, for a cold climate. So a lot more to talk about in this garden. Maybe that can be reserved for another time. In fact, I'll ask here, put in the comments, are there certain key aspects to this garden you'd like to see more detail, more focus on? Do you have questions about some of the aspects of what we've been doing in here that I've mentioned? Be happy to go deeper into that. For the moment, I'm going to, because this video is getting long enough, I'm going to take a quick sneak peek. There's some elements I want to talk about quite soon. This is our neighbor's lawn to food forest conversion project. We just, this last week, built a whole bunch of really sturdy, really robust, all black locust and galvanized metal air prune boxes. There's going to be about 2,000 trees growing in these boxes, and then raised garden beds in the middle. So that's all new. We'll be sharing notes on that shortly. And the high tunnel probably deserves its own update relatively soon. Our neighbors have been starting to get more and more active and excited in the gardening process, so we're developing some designs for space over here and talking about growing more and more up into their landscape, which is immensely exciting. And this space, I won't go too much in detail, but it's growing. It's kind of a mess right now. We've got all sorts of creakiness. We've got annual starts going and a lot more transplanting to do. We've been too busy to get things really organized in here, but overall it is growing and producing, and we've been harvesting, our neighbors have been harvesting huge amounts of mustards and lots and lots of fresh salads. Really wonderful, exciting developments in here. I think we could do for a little bit more watering overall, figuring out a better system for that. But this space has just been creating wave after wave of transplants. All of these will be lifted, cut back into salads, and then set into new garden beds. And it's been just this incredibly abundant source of early green transplants without a lot of fuss. Everything's in the ground. We just wait for days like this where it's misty and rainy and then do our transplanting. But we've got hundreds more of these broccolis and lettuces, and Anise hyssop needs to move out soon. Really appreciating this space. It was a good investment. This was the Farmer's Friend Gothic high tunnel, 50-foot high tunnel. We're certainly not sponsored by them, but it's done pretty darn well for extreme winds and lots of snow. This is its second year, and we'll see how it goes over time. We'll be sharing more notes and going into more detail on specifically that whole air prune bed project. I feel like Juan and I have come up with some upgrades to our basic design that feel really functional and meaningful. It's definitely a version 2 and hopefully completely rodent proof at this point. I want to share much more thorough notes about some aspirations we have to do hugely increased potato production. It feels like this is a year with any year it's good to grow more food than you need. I feel like this year in particular, I'm hoping folks are lining up. Anybody that has the wherewithal and the body ability and access to land to grow as much food as possible for yourselves and your family and your community. And we'll share notes about that in detail as well. But that was a long enough video for today. Thanks for watching. Let me know if there's some other key areas that I haven't, or that you saw as we're walking through the garden and I didn't go into enough detail, or if you've got questions or you've got concerns or feedback. All of those things are welcome. Hope you all are well and getting ready to have an excelsior growing season this year if you're not already fully underway. Folks in the South, I bet you're already starting to eat a lot of crops from your garden. Share some notes. What are you excited about? And thanks for watching.